Okay, today is Monday, June 17th. We are starting our executive committee meeting at 7:18. First on the agenda, we will be going, just to give us a quick timeline of the district needs budget. George, if you can just walk us through what we need to do,
Sure.
when we need to, submit ideas, et cetera.
I'll just read what city planning sent to me on May 23rd. As this fiscal year, so just so everybody understands, we're talking about fiscal year ending in 2026. The way the city budget works is, the end of our fiscal year is June 30th. So fiscal year 2025 is about to happen in a couple of weeks, 2 more weeks. July 1st, 2024 starts fiscal year 2025. So the district needs statement that we're putting together now is not for that. It's for July 1st, 2025, ending in June 30th, 2026. As we approach the community district needs cycle is approaching, we're beginning our full slate of community board support activities to align with planned form opening in June, with the platform opening in June, and allow district managers and other community board staff to begin crafting submissions prior to the summertime recess. So basically, June is our opportunity. We could probably do some stuff over the summer, but summer is really hard for a lot of people. But June is our opportunity to meet with, well, I will tell you how it was done in the past, and then I'll tell you. So prior to me getting here, Father Gorman would put together, the former chair would put together the district needs statement, I guess, in consultation with board members. Kind of did that. When I got here, I kind of wanted to open that up and have meetings. We have not necessarily been successful on that front, on getting the Parks Department or the Parks Committee is probably the only committee that meets regularly with the Parks Commissioner to go over the budget. We've done that regularly now for like the last 6 or 7 years. So that's probably the only agency, but theoretically, each agency that has something before us, we don't meet with every city agency during district budget consultations. We only meet with the major agencies. So we could meet with like the 47th precinct, the fire department, agencies like that, mostly enforcement agencies, uniform agencies. Those are the ones that you would meet with to say, why are certain things happening, and this is what we'd like to see. So as an example, the complaints that we receive from here and on a local basis is like, the cleanliness of White Plains Road, the bike lanes issue. So we can talk about, there's a lot of stuff loaded into that, the cleanliness. We can talk to the Department of Sanitation about additional pickup baskets. We can talk to the sanitation about getting more enforcement agents to write summonses to the property owners so that they can, keep their sidewalks clean. We can talk about mechanical plumes going down or their inability to go down bike lanes because of the lack of enforcement, because as you can see right outside our front door, the bike lanes are blocked with private vehicles. So those are certain things that we can talk about, and we can speak to our agencies and have them tell us, theoretically they would tell us what they need. Problem is, or the concern has always been, and this is true dating back to the Bloomberg administration, the administration tells you they have what they need, and therefore they don't need any extra. But the timeline would be, you would meet in June, and by late September, early October, when we're doing the chair of each community board and the district manager from every community board, we get together for what's called borough-wide consultations. We would have submitted before then all of our needs for that. So there's 2 things happening simultaneously. This district needs statement, then there's a borough-wide statement. Borough-wide obviously is what it is, it sounds like. They try not to focus on singular, like, you wouldn't bring up cleanliness on White Plains Road 229 at the borough-wide consultation. But you could talk overall, be like, oh, hey, I was driving along Fordham Road, or I was driving in the Bronx, and, I noticed the highways are not necessarily clean, or blah, 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 or, whatever. So that's also happening right now, but for us to submit stuff, the committee should be meeting, talking about what they feel the needs for the community are.
That's for the district.
Yeah, that's for the district, and then we can submit, a statement. Now, there is a time frame that we have to submit all of this. I don't have the drop dead date. That's what I was looking for in the emails.
Just like the deadline for us to put this together for you.
Yeah, but it's not for some time, because the process really starts in June. Like I said, the submissions to meet with the agencies are not until the end of September, early October, when we do wide consultations. And then what happens is, so after you make your submission, it is incumbent upon the city agency that you made the submission to respond. And then they respond, they say, you may have seen that we do share our register.
That's the one that we went over, I think it was around
Yeah.
February, March.
Yeah, so in the register, the city agency responds and says, you should, generally speaking, again, most of the time it's like, oh, we feel like this item is funded already, or we speak to your local elected official to get commitments from there. So, like especially on parks initiatives, like there's a lot of parks initiatives, like our number one priority right now is Shoelace Park. That's number one on our capital. And I'm sorry, I should have explained that earlier, Sue. There are two types of submission requests. There's expense, and then there's capital. Capital is anything over 35,000, and it's usually hard costs. Computers, cars, vehicles, buildings, parks, a bathroom for a park, anything like that. Then expense stuff is programmatic funding. It could bring, we want a new team program for high school or something, or a computer program. Not necessarily buying a computer, but, a teacher to pay for that stuff. The only interesting part about capital, one of the requests that we've always had from the NYPD is for more vehicles. Because the NYPD runs their vehicles so hard and all the time, that's not considered a capital cost, that's considered an expense, because they deteriorate so quickly. But that's basically it. There is a limit, but we've never really reached that limit.
Of what?
Of submissions.
Really?
So there's I think for expense, it's like 47 or 42. Yeah, it's in the 40s, and then for capital, it's like 32 or 33.
So it's expensive services, you were saying, like?
Yeah, like programmatic, more along the stuff that you do. Generally speaking, you're paying a nonprofit to provide service for something.
So services, capital, and even like if we wanted stuff for the board, we know that the majority, the funding that we get is minimal. We don't get much. But if we wanted like to buy something like for what we were talking about, like grants and stuff for the board, what would that fall under?
Well, we could do that in-house. We were just saying that we couldn't do it because the money that we for this month, but for July, we could do it together.
Okay.
But that's, if you wanted extra money, I mean, so for example, you're looking for a planning cabinet, and you've gone to the council for, that's gonna be an expense item, that's not a capital request, yeah.
And so we could submit a request through that, not capital, through that expense.
Well, it's the district needs it, you can make those submissions. You can make, anything. I mean, you can address flooding, you can address anything, I mean, really.
We're gonna get it, but this is the opportunity for us to discuss or kind of like identify what some of those needs are. Does anybody have any questions?
I think we need to put on capital, I don't remember we still have it, we need to make this.
Yeah, we still have.
We still have it?
Yeah.
Reach to the building. Yeah, like this right here, over here, where the link is.
always say they fix the roof and then, I don't know.
Does anybody have any questions about the budgets? Anybody online have any questions? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. I don't know if you all remember, but we, February, and sure, George, I think I shared it with you. There was like a survey I found online of another board that used it to give to their board members to kind of like come up with some ideas. Because you have to submit all this around the time we meet for the borough consultation, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'll send, the meeting out with whatever the drop that date is.
But because we don't meet July and August, maybe this is something we could circulate in the meantime. So I just want to share my screen. All right, can everybody online hear us and see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this is an example of a district needs survey that I found online that a Brooklyn Community Board is using. So I feel like, and I circulated this back in February. So this seems like kind of like a format that we can use. And just to give you an example, like these are some of the things they're asking. Do you live, work, or otherwise have a significant interest in the district? And so this is what they added to theirs. Healthcare and human services, youth education and child welfare, public safety and emergency services, or infrastructure, city services. This is where we would put our infrastructure, right? Like if we wanted, to add that.
Just to be clear, this is actually what we submit. So it looks like they took the district needs statement that city planning provides and pasted it. So this is when when I'm typing in what our submissions are, this is what
Right.
they ask.
So this is good because then it can survey, our board members to see what they're prioritizing. George, correct me if I'm wrong, once the board kind of like collectively decides what we want to prioritize as our needs, then you would include that in your submission.
Yeah.
Okay. And so again, I shared it with you all. I'm gonna share it again, but I feel like this is a good format that we can use, and then we can add, under each sector, you see that there's other that you can also add your ideas. But if you have any other ideas, then we should add it. And again, this is for board members to submit. Any questions? What do you all think? What is your?
How would they submit this? Is this gonna be on paper?
This is
or
the
gonna be
Google form, electronic. So we would circulate it electronically. You would all have the opportunity to check off what you deem is important or identify what's important. And then based off that, we can kind of see what we're prioritizing, what we have,
What some people want us.
Right.
I think this is a great idea to capture feedback from people about what they want to see, and maybe, priorities are this year a little bit different from last year, or you can see what things. Would we then, like after we get all the results from the community board members, would we kind of formalize it, like a board meeting
Yes.
to vote on?
Probably September, because then George has to submit this on our behalf
Okay.
And we usually have we're supposed to have a public hearing.
as well. And then we can send this to our board members. Is this something we can also send to your mailing list?
Well, so at some point, you have to be through committee, you're supposed to hear from the public. You take
Right.
information, what their requests are, in the past. For example, the number one priority when I got here for many years was the rec center. Ultimately, but that had been on the register for like 25 years.
Ever since I started.
Yeah, so, you have to have some flexibility with it. But yeah, that came from that. There's some discrepancy, there's some people in the community who feel like they're the ones who generated that conversation. We talked to Ursula, the board members, that came up with that, first. So at some point, you do have to like take into account what the community wants, but you guys live here, like all our board members are required to live in this community, so your input is just as valuable as everybody else's. I would just say that the public hearing, you can take in that information, and depending on, like I said, there is a limit, but we've never reached that limit. So, and the only other thing, one of the things that I like to do is I actually like to see results. So if you ask for something that's like completely out of the blue, that doesn't have any consensus from an agency that it's even a need, then, it may not necessarily be worth asking. So for example, with the rec center, that was on our register for 25 years, and the only reason it really became a reality is because one of our local elected officials became the speaker of the assembly. Otherwise, that would have never happened. And I recall meetings with the mayor's office, with back then Larry Seabrook and Larry Warden, who were then the assembly and the city councilman, and them talking about this whole plan, never really getting anywhere because the Parks Department was resistant, because they always kept saying that they didn't have the funding for it, which is why they say, you have to, go speak to your local elected officials. But that would be my only suggestion. The only way you find that stuff out is by having those conversations. So to use the Parks Department as an example, we've had meetings with the Bronx River Alliance, and they have a master plan in place. You can pick some of the things off that master plan to prioritize. And I think they've done some of that stuff already, but there's more stuff that can get done if we can get the funding for it.
Yeah, one point to that is that, a lot of times having stuff on your district needs statement is really impactful, and then we can advocate around our district needs. And just like George is saying with the Shoelace Park thing, the Shoelace Park funding for getting these playgrounds out of the flood zone, since we took that vote a couple months ago, is now on the short list to receive $5 million of federal funds from Richie Flores to remove those playgrounds and that was out of the flood zone. So things like this and starting the conversation, putting down and writing what our needs are, it's huge, especially when we can amplify it more.
And then prioritize which gets the highest. We can put up to how many priority, oh, you're saying it doesn't matter, we can add as many as we.
Well, for capital, I think it's in the 40s, and for expense, no, I'm sorry, for expense, it's in the 40s, for capital, it's in the 30s. But we've never,
Reach that, okay.
yeah, I mean, like, every capital, a lot.
So now how does it work if something we're asking for really falls under the purview of a nonprofit? Right, so Beatrice, when you were showing us that form, there was something about technology training for seniors, NYPL does that. So who decides, oh, this is not a New York City expense, we're gonna, toss it over the fence to one of the 8,000 nonprofits.
Well, so you said for seniors? Or,
That's just a random.
I would give that in there though.
yeah, I mean, so basically the city of New York has an agency or some sort of unit within an agency that handles almost everything that the city does. So
Of course.
if like there's ByCD, which is the Department of Youth and Community Development. I think in the past, some of our requests have been the increase in SYEP funding for some of the youth employment programs. The mayor did that. Is it adequate? Like that's a debate that we could have. To your point, you like computer classes for seniors so that they can, whatever, you can make that expense request and say, we'd like, funding program through DIFTA, which is the Department for the Aging. We use acronyms, I'm sorry. So DIFTA is Department for the Aging, and you can do it for that, but that would only be seniors. But you can use ByCD because it's not just youth, it's also community development. So, there's pockets. And same thing, like if you say we want, the Doe Fund. We want to fund the Doe Fund to keep, White Plains Road clean. That's a program money, that's not a capital money. You can put that through BFNY, which is Department of Sanitation, or, maybe there. I mean, the city has wide latitude on, because the other thing is, the city council gets pockets of money from different agencies. So your council member will get discretionary funding from DIPSA, from BYCD, Department of Sanitation. Then the speaker has an allocation that they'll spread amongst the council members. So there's a lot of different pools that we can get appeals from, yes.
And doesn't the city also give money to MMPL? Like,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
so we could ask for more funding for your public libraries.
We've done it in the past, asked for funding for them to, increase.
That's an expensive price, right?
Yeah, that's an expensive price.
Right, so I guess my question is, when do you know whether to go, say, directly to NYPL, so we have Sunday access hours again? And when do you put it in our bucket of requests for the city, and then they throw it over?
Look, NYPL actually submits a list to us because we have 4 libraries in our community board. So they submit a list of all the capital requests. We share that with the board, with the committee. And, we'll, generally speaking, we'll put them in. I will say that, like, the last library was the Woodlawn Library, and they got their capital funding. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so Etonia had a question, and yes, we can absolutely add that to our list.
Well, playground.
Where's?
So this is a great question because Edenwald Playground, could be NYCHA, or it could be a Parks Department.
We add it to both?
No, if it has the leaf on the outside, it's a Parks Department project, so they can.
So there's recently, they did some capital work. in
They
the
did the
park.
mini pool.
Yeah, mini pool.
Yeah.
They supposed to be
That's where we're supposed to go, right? Ribbon cutting,
Yeah,
right? They just-
Yeah, that's the ribbon, they canceled it.
Right,
Yeah.
that, so they have done stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know whose that is, but they're redoing, so maybe they'll redo the playground too.
well, I know, so a couple of years ago, they did Lachanta Playground, Andy King did Lachanta. They also did, Magenta is in Gun Hill, houses. Eden Wall, again, that's just I don't know if that's a Parks Department, but we can find out. I mean, we'll find out if it's a Parks Department. We can. Who made the question if we can?
Tonya?
Oh, it's all, yeah, all right, yeah, we can.
Okay, you heard it, Tonya?
Again, the only thing would be that, so the Parks Department is notorious.
They
And-
never got no money.
Well, it's not that they don't have money, it's just that, and others can explain it better probably. If the work isn't scoped out already, then that's a process. Like, it'll take them 2 or 3 years. And they don't start capital projects, which is why like the master plan is kind of still just a plan. So they get all the funding. So like, if I inherited $150 million and gave it to the Parks Department, they could do the master plan. But if you give them $4 million and the project costs $10 million, it's not going anywhere. So you have to, like, if you're gonna get council commitment, and that's why it's hard to get council commitments or elected official commitments, because it'll take, so to Luke's point that Richie Torres is gonna give, is potentially gonna give them money to fix something. If that's not the whole cost of the project, then it's just gonna sit there until all the monies are in the budget to start it. So that's what the challenge is.
Do those monies expire after a certain amount of time?
Not really. So in Woodlawn, they've been debating for the last, 15 years, the pedestrian bridge over the 87. Like that money, I think that money came from the filtration plant settlement, which was probably more than 20 years ago. So that money's kind of been I think it's like $43 million has been sitting there. And I think if I'm not mistaken, the Parks Department now already had different plans in
You
it.
bet on, right?
Yeah, they have
We
a
were
plan
supposed to get a walkthrough.
to improve that area.
back for the park?
Yeah, that's pedestrian.
Okay, yeah.
We were supposed to get a walk, that never happened.
Let's talk offline.
Yeah, okay. All right, so
But
that,
to your answer, yeah, the money sits there.
Okay.
all right, so this is what the recommendation is gonna be. I'm gonna float this survey around, which you all have, but we have about 2 months to kind of like fine tune it. Each committee chair should be adding what they feel is also necessary. Then you'll bring it to your committee, and then we'll get it done by the time our full board meets in September, so that then we finalize it, vote on it, and pass it on to George to submit our marketing. Okay, so that's what the plan is going to be.
Great.
All right, so I'm gonna move on from that. Does anybody online have any questions? Any of our executive members? Okay, so the
Good.
next, yes?
No, I said, I'm good. Clinton, I'm good.
Okay, great. Moving on then, so that covers item 1, item 2, item 3, consolidating our committees. This is something that we discussed back in, I think it was like November. And we made a few suggestions. I'm gonna bring that up, but at this point, we don't even have a forum here to even make votes. So I'm gonna share again the document that I shared, when I put together my report. I'm gonna just pass it on to bylaws. And then from there, we'll take it up again in September when we meet.
Okay, sure.
But this is, let me just share my screen again. So this is what we had proposed back in November 13th, and I can share this again with everybody. But this was suggestion 1, George had made that suggestion. This was suggestion 2. And can we just remove the, no, not that, we can't. So then these are the 2 suggestions we made, but like I said, I'm gonna just pass this on now to bylaws. If you can take your recommendations into consideration, and then you'll bring it back to us September, early on in the month to give us time, and then we'll continue the discussion there.
Okay, we should see if Carl, as chair of bylaws, has any comment on this.
I don't know.
So, it's-
Carl?
Yes, I think that's good. We'll pass what you have on to us. We'll have a meeting prior to, try to have it prior to the executive board in September and come back with our recommendation. The only problem I have with sharing, 2 meetings at one night, if they're compatible, say housing and land use, just for example. And, Bob would handle the housing area and I would handle the land use area. But who winds up doing the minutes? Because we're gonna have 2 separate committees meeting together. Who winds up doing the minutes?
I think we can discuss that. It's doable.
Yep, so it's like, that could become a problem.
So I have a question about, like, you had mentioned, wanting to retain, committee
Yeah.
chairs.
So as co-chairs, so you're all co-chairs.
What about if, and I don't want to derail any progress, but what about instead of combining the committees, we just make the schedules on the same night? So, the committees will retain themselves separately, but we just change our monthly schedule so that the housing meeting and the land use committee are on the same night. And then the first meeting starts at 7, and then the chairs among themselves determine, hey, let's allocate 45 minutes, and then we change the way to do it. So it's the same night, and they're 2, similar topics, but we don't have to go through a land use change. We can just
Right.
schedule.
For the experts, I like that idea.
I mean, the bylaws change, but these changes, they just doesn't require as extensive of voting and stuff.
Do we have the space for that to
Yeah,
simultaneously.
we can take note of that. That's a good idea, actually.
That would be here.
Well, not simultaneously, but one after the consecutive, but then the chairs determine, okay, my committee will go first, your go second, you have to figure out.
Yeah, but what happens when the committee goes over time?
But it would be the same, we're consolidating, we're still gonna go over time if it's four happening the same day. What we're saying, what he's suggesting is that we do have, however, we decide to combine them that same day, so it's grouped that same day, but it's still your chairs, you still have the chairs of each committee. So instead of it being combined and then these combined chairs, we're gonna just have each individual standing committee to, however we group them on that day. If you want me to show you on the screen, kind of like what that means?
Yeah, I mean, before the pandemic, we used to have 2 and sometimes more meetings on the same night. It was kind of interesting because one committee would maybe close earlier, and then the members of that committee would wander into another meeting, like, because we have this meeting room and one downstairs, and sometimes a third group would meet in the carriage house. So, we used to do that, just have multiple meetings in the same night. But we didn't have the same technology issues back then, because they were just meetings, right? People took minutes,
Right.
there was no expectation of recording live and having technical support.
Yeah.
So it was a
I
whole.
mean, the other reason why we are combining committees is also because we're not moving forward. Right, like that was the other issue, that we needed folks here, and so we combine them, then the probability of us meeting form would be greater. So we do have to keep that in mind as well.
And I think looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have to make,
Too
we
nice.
have to make sure the committees meet. We have one committee, I think, this year only met once and they never had another meeting.
Right, like
And
we have
that's,
public
I
safety,
think that's the health committee.
yours hasn't
Yeah.
met, so those,
Our Parks Committee hasn't met, I mean, with quorum, so quorum is a challenge, and
It is.
combining committees can help that, maybe that's the way to go.
Are they separate? All right, so I'm not really clear. So they're separate meetings. And then how would you make quorum if it's a separate?
Well, so we're talking.
well, that's why I just said that, thinking of it, the concern is that the reason why we're combining is because we need to meet quorum. So us having more members under that one group, we're more likely to meet quorum that way. So, so Luke's idea is a good one, but however, then it still defeats the purpose of meeting quorum.
Well, so just so we understand. I submitted a proposal which addressed all of these issues. This was an alternative that was brought up here, drawn on the board, that didn't answer the question because I'm still confused. Carl just said the land use and housing committee are gonna meet. Are they gonna be two separate committees, or is it, you're gonna have the same members, board members for each committee?
So now we would be combining the board members, but we would be keeping, my recommendation is that we still keep the chairs of each, we make them co-chairs. If a housing matter comes up, Robert Hall can chair that portion of it. If a land use issue comes up, Carl could, chair that portion of it. And the same for whoever else is part of those committees.
So who votes?
Everybody.
Everybody would be a part of that.
My understanding is if I have 5 members and someone else I've joined forces with to run a meeting has 5, so that's 10 between us.
You're all right, they're all members.
They're all, in that moment, they're all members of that joint effort. So the quorum is 51%. So if there's 6 people between us, that's a vote.
But aren't there also some overlapping with committees?
Well, so again, what are we calling this committee?
Doesn't necessarily
Yeah,
matter.
the names.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
So you wanted to second, but, what,
Let me share.
So we'll workshop a name, but I think the important thing is to really consolidate stuff so we can start meeting on a regular basis. Because
And we
it's
have,
really,
we need more
it's
members.
frustrating trying to advance stuff for the Parks Committee when we don't have a quorum. So I think this is a great idea. We can figure out whatever bureaucratic issues that naming convention requires, but really, we really want to have a meeting of quorum and this helps reduce the amount of meetings, you know? If you're on multiple committees, do you want to meet 4 times a month?
No,
No. You want to meet twice a month. So this is a really good
I
way.
think that's excellent. I
And
think
for
that's,
those who don't want to be here 10 times.
Yeah, me too.
Together,
Yeah.
together to do this, right?
no, but, so this is what I'm talking about, this is what leads to confusion. You create one committee, like you said, whatever, workshop the name. Your problem, you're seeing this in the corporate world or you have revolving heads of that same committee.
Yeah.
So because you have the land committee, just call it that. So if it's a land use issue, if 3901 White Plains Road comes up for discussion, I guess Carl will be chair of that night.
Right, and if there's another matter that comes up, let's say for small business, right? I don't know how the setup is gonna be yet, then, the Benitez would chair that portion of the meeting.
They have equal responsibility as chairs, but they have to work together to determine what is the best, lead. It's not necessarily chairing that portion, it's leading that portion. So
I have some,
we're all chairs.
so just, so is I mean, you would start over, I guess, from the beginning, from scratch to go ahead with this plan, but can't the person, the area expertise, that stakeholder speak on that issue
That's what I'm saying,
without being a chair of the committee?
but they could be co-chairs, they're leading, they're.
So the chairing and co-chairing is a title. I'm just thinking if one person chairs the committee, but the area expert speaks on the matter, that can't work. It has to be where the issue is really that, like majored in the minors, like we have to be called a chairperson, when you could have one chairperson, right? And if I'm the expert in this area, then I speak. Because my chair is okay because I have some autonomy about this issue. But because I need to be also called a chair, then I'm gonna be a co-chair. So now you have issue with minute taking. Who's gonna take the minutes? Because it just needs to be for me, but you don't have to start over. You just have a chair, and then the person who has the expertise in the area speak on that matter.
But if they're co-chairs, why can't they write the minutes for their portion, and then you submit it as one?
But why can't one person write all the minutes that's there sitting down in one?
But that makes a lot, for one person to write the minutes.
So the leadership structure can maybe be determined by the new group of people. So let's say the land use committee joins with the housing committee. Those two committees can talk about who wants to run for vice chair. If they both, let's say, have decided that they both want to do co-chair, it would depend on the grouping of people. Because each grouping of committee people are different. And maybe somebody says, hey, I'll volunteer. I don't want to be the chair. I'll be the vice chair. I'll be the. But we're not forcing anybody to be chair and co-chair. We're just saying, hey, we're not going to take your title if that's really important to you. We're going to work with you.
yeah, I think, the way how we have the committees right now, we can keep the committees as they are. We can combine the meetings, so we have to have land use and housing on the same night. Now, let's use the random figures. Let's the land use have 10 members, housing have 10. We're looking at 20.
Right.
They each attend both meetings, but they can only vote in their section of the meeting. So just like we're doing online right now,
But that wouldn't.
with the same thing we're doing online. I attend a lot of meetings, but I know I cannot vote in some of the meetings.
But it's more impactful than they all, it's more impactful because that's what we need, right? It's more impactful than all of them.
But the quorum for each committee has a certain amount of members.
But not everybody.
Meet jointly
If I know I have to only come out to 2 meetings a month, I think I'd be more likely to make it to every meeting rather than 4 meetings.
Separate meetings. You need, you're combining them.
Or 2 separate meetings. You're combining housing and land, parks and education. Those are like our 4 major committees. The others, if they want to,
Well, let me just suggest something else too. All for consolidation. Where you think it can work. God bless you. We had 3901 Whiteland. We had land use committee meeting here. I understand that your time is all valuable, but that's a pretty weighty issue. They were talking about building a 14-story building, and our committee members discussed the issue, and then they were eager to get out of the building. And that's fine. I'm here all day, and I also want to go home by 9 o'clock. But sometimes we don't get everything that needs to get done. So adding more responsibilities to the committee, again, you create a committee, consolidate it, whatever way you want to chop it up, that's. But I'm just suggesting the less committees you have, that means the more responsibility that each one of them has to undertake, and that members have to be here. One of the things that we always talk about or chatter after these meetings, especially when we're outside of Lakes Road, is doing away with the hydro law. I mean, this is an executive committee meeting tonight, and we don't have a quorum. And this is the chairs of our committee and our executive people. There's 2 executives in this room right now. That's it. So, our executives have to lead by example. I have to lead by example. Our board members have to lead by example. And I'm just saying, like, some of this stuff, especially like City of Yes, we made an interesting point at our last land use meeting. We didn't even, and the compromise was that we would all submit it. That kind of gets a little weird. It's, Luke might be positive on some stuff and other board members might be less positive. And how do I write that letter saying, well, some people were here without voting on that issue? Right now, in the City of Yes, we're a no, but like I said, the worksheet doesn't have to be submitted until quite some time. So we can probably bring that back sometime. But I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of weighty stuff that's going to come across the board. When Wakefield Village comes to us, that's not going to be done in one meeting. And you're going to need the flexibility to have multiple meetings on this, over the course of time. So that's all I'm suggesting.
So we shouldn't be deterred by the prospect of having work and having tough meetings, having tough conversations, having things on our agenda, right? That's actually what brings people out. Look how many people came to the Wakefield City of Yes things. It's interesting. How many times is the park committee, the safety committee, no worries, Alfredo, it's fine. But some of our committees aren't meeting, and it's a simple fact that we don't have big one. So let's not be deterred by strong agendas, because that will motivate people to get it. So let's work together on this one, and let's come to this full board meeting without, we don't know what the future will hold, but we know that we need to do something.
I'm not suggesting it as a deterrent. I'm just saying that when you have multiple heads, if you put land use and housing together, and it becomes, well, I'm the chair of the land use committee, so I'm only going to do this, and I'm the chair of the housing committee, and we're only going to do this. They're going to spend significant times, maybe wasted, on those issues. So my suggestion is you do away with that. The proposal that I suggested to you, because we do have an executive committee, not a committee, but we do have executive officers, is that if you're an executive officer, you shouldn't be the chair of a committee. Make it more equitable that way so that more board members have an opportunity to serve in the capacity as chair. Also, put term limits on everything, so that you have term limits on executive officers and you have term limits on chairs. So that if your concern is getting more and more diverse opinions, then you have the opportunity to do that sort of thing.
Okay, so, Carla, you've heard our recommendations. We're gonna pass this to bylaws. You have it in writing what some of the suggestions were. So we're gonna pass it on to you.
So we have to decide on 3 names for the committees, just in case, or?
So we're gonna pass it on, and we can submit recommendations to your committee.
Well, sure, every board member, every member of the public can attend every meeting. So bylaws can take this on board in terms of only presenting a way forward. But everybody still gets an opinion. Everybody can join every meeting and be heard. So, it's just a way to take this offline and have it debated in a smaller group so the entire board doesn't have to debate it unless you want to.
And we can vote it up or down. And submit recommendations, so we still can decide. And again, this is worth trying. And if it doesn't work out, we bring it back to the drawing board and we continue the process.
Yeah, and
We're able to change it, even if it goes into bylaws, this, we're still able to amend it, change it as we see fit.
And it relies on a conversation among the existing chairs to figure out what the best leadership structure is. We're not necessarily gonna put 2 chairs head to head. I don't think we really have that internal contention very much with us, so it's not gonna be an issue with people
Yeah.
wanting to.
There's gonna be a way to work, and again, if it needs to come back, we'll come back to the committee and we'll continue the restructuring until we find the perfect fit.
What is the remedy for, attending meetings, so we don't have quorum?
Well, at this point, look, we're down to now 37 members. We've kind of eliminated those that aren't participating actively. They've stepped down. We'll continue that process. Send out letters, and we're at 37 now. Where were we at when we first started, George and yourself? How many members? We were at 40.
No,
No, in the
before-
beginning.
First thought, wasn't we?
Oh, we have like 47.
Like 47, we're down to 37.
It's fluctuating.
But we should get 50, right?
We had that. We don't want, we have 47 and 10 of them are at.
That's
I
like,
think that's from the.
It's hard to
So we have- I'm one of 50.
Right.
One
But
of 50 potential, that's the max.
of seat, one of the seat.
And I should mention that in our bylaws, Article 6 committees, Section 2, it says that the committee chairperson and all of the members of the committee shall be appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the chairperson of the board. So Beatrice, if you find any issues with 2 chair people butting heads, not getting along, not leading the committee in the right way, it's your duty to reconfigure the
Right.
committee.
Right.
So that won't be an issue if George does.
Yeah. I hope to not have to observe that, but there are ways. we
Yeah.
can. Okay, any questions? Because that was any new business items, executive officers, executive committee chairs that you want to bring up? Any of our executive committee members are online?
I just wanted to mention that, the board passed, I'm not gonna be here next week, the meeting, but the board passed that recommendation for advancing funding for Shoelace Park, and we got, it's not a victory per se, but it's a small step. And it goes to show that when we put our heads together and advocate for something, we can really,
The impact.
it really has an impact, so it's really cool what we can do.
Thank you for sharing. All right, so, motion to close?
Second.
Okay, so, we are closing this meeting at 8:07. Thank you all for joining.